There we go. Okay, so everything y'all said about what you know is pretty much the common knowledge of the Tower of Babel. Okay, the people were together. They were doing something that God didn't like. God came down, confounded their languages, and split them all up. Okay? All right, so knowing that much, let's read. Genesis chapter 10, verses 6 through 12. Oh, I was like, where in the world? That's your ring thing, isn't it?
That's my ring.
That's cool.
Hi.
Hey,
Good. Hi, Kim.
let's start right over here with Elizabeth.
Here, you sit right here.
That's okay.
No, I'll get another chair. There you go, right there.
I'll sit right here.
Hang on just a second.
I'll sit right here.
We're getting situated.
And the sons of Ham, Cush, and Mizraim.
There you go, Mizraim.
Put.
Foot.
And Canaan.
And the sons of Cush, Seba, Havilah, and Sapha, and Rama, and Sabekta, and the sons of Rama, Sheba, and Dedan.
Wow. Nailed it. Good job.
I've been reading that book a long
All right.
And Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth.
Okay, let's stop right there. So we're talking about the descendants of Ham. Okay? So, trivia. What was Ham's other two brothers' names?
Shem and,
Japheth?
Japheth.
yes.
There you go. Noah's three boys.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? So from Shem, you have all those that they refer to as the Semite people, which specifically, that's the lineage of Jesus. Okay, that's Abraham, all those things we talked about. All right, well then you've got Japheth, which we understand became mostly the European folks, predominantly, okay? And then you've got Ham, which those were the ones that became Ethiopians, Egyptians, Libyans, other Arabian type people, okay? So Cush also had a son named Nimrod. And that's going to be the biggest point of our study tonight, is this guy named Nimrod. It says he began to be a mighty one in the earth. Okay? Now, before I get too far into this, part of my study over the last probably been 6 or maybe 7 years is trying to weed out truth from folklore. Okay? There's a lot of folklore out there. There's a lot of myths and legends and trying to nail down what was truth, because I only want to know the truth. What's the truth? Give me the bottom line here, okay? And wow, is there a lot of stuff out there about old Nimrod. All right? So my little, your fridge is open, by the way. My little excursion, or our little excursion to London, which took me to the British Museum, I was able to find some artifacts that helped me filter out truth from legend and myth. Okay? And so, as I go through this tonight, there will be some things that I will clarify as, now this may be myth or legend, but then there's things where I'm going to say, this is artifacts, facts, things like that. Okay? All right, so let's go to verse 9.
Okay, well, Nimrod, I guess it says, was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord.
All right.
Okay, that's it.
And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh, and in the land of Shinar.
Okay. So I'm going to give you a little fun fact here. See where it says Calneh? Just about all of these places have other names because of the transition of language. Okay? Calneh, you all know as Nineveh.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a cool little fun fact. There's other words in here. It it's a little bit of a debate, but on which one of these that was also a town called Nimrud, Nimrud. Okay, there's another one of those that I could give you all the stuff on it, but it really don't matter for the whole scheme of things. I just want to mention that name, okay? All right, let's go to verse 11 now.
Out of that land went forth Asher and builded Nineveh and the city Rehoboth and Calah.
Okay, now you said, now wait a minute, you just said the other one was Nineveh, okay? So what we find here in Scripture is an overlap. There's two different things happening at the same time, okay? And it says here that Asher went out and built Nineveh, all right? But according to historical documents, Asher worked with Nimrod. This was all part of Nimrod's kingdom. Now, Asher is who later on became the Assyrians. You know, those of you who know your history kind of stuff there. All right, verse 12.
And Resen between Nineveh and Calah. The same is a great city.
So we have another little interesting thing here is, when I was in the British Museum, I think I told y'all how, you know, they feel like they found proof that agriculture and farming began in northern Mesopotamia between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which is where it is commonly held that the Garden of Eden was. Of course, that's where farming started, because that's where Adam and Eve went out and had to start tilling the ground, okay? Well, one of the other amazing things about these cities is these are also the oldest cities ever discovered on the planet. Okay, they have artifacts that show that Nineveh and Nimrod and all these names you see here, even parts of Babylon and where Baghdad is and Mosul and a lot of those cities that we're familiar with now, like they literally are as old as humanity. Okay? I can't pronounce the guy's name. He was an archaeologist out of England. That is the one that's been given all of the, I think it's Woolry, something like that. He's the one that's been credited with finding so much of the artifacts and been able to break the codes and understand it. And I'm telling y'all, I want to go back to London just to spend a week in the British Museum, just to soak it all up again, okay? But to get to see things that validate Scripture is so cool. So let's just kind of hash this out a little bit. Nimrod's kingdom started at Babel, which is called the land of Shinar. I'm going to show you the map here in just a minute, if I can get there. So here's our map. We have the Persian Gulf down here. Right here is Ur. Now the way I've got this map set, I can't blow this one up like I have in the other one. So right here is Ur. There's the Eric, kind of work its own way up. There's Babylon. Get up in here. There's Nimrod, Calah, Nineveh. All these right here, right there together. Haran, where Abraham left out of, is over here. Of course, this is where Israel is now, this general area. Y'all can kind of see where everything's at. But this whole thing right here was considered Nimrod's kingdom. He wasn't just a mighty hunter. He was a mighty king. He had some other names. I can't pronounce the most popular one. It starts with an A and it's about 17 letters long. He was known as that, okay? And he was, it's there. You can see it with the archaeological history that what we're reading here is true, okay? So I just want to start out by saying, tonight we're going to talk about Nimrod, we're going to talk about his kingdom, we're going to talk about what started here and why it's so important, I believe, that we take time tonight to study this out, okay? But now I want to go to the actual Tower of Babel. That's in Genesis 11, 1 through 9. It's not on your paper. I hope you have your Bibles. So Genesis 11, verses 1 through 9. Uh-oh. Came to Bible study, that's right.
Well, you can choose it on the paper, or have other stuff today.
That's like people in church, it's usually on the screen. Yeah, throw them a curveball.
Now the whole world had one language and a common speech.
Okay, so we're at Tower of Babel, they all got one language, okay?
As the people migrated to
Somebody have a different translation there? What do you got?
In Shinar. Ah, looky
Is that
there.
right there?
Yeah.
So it's somewhere in this general area. Now, I will tell you this, there is a lot of debate over exactly where the Tower of Babel was. Alright? There's some guys that are like adamant, it was up here in this northern area, close to Nineveh. There's other people that are adamant that it was that ziggurat of Ur that I showed y'all earlier. There's other people that says it's somewhere in the middle. The one thing they can all agree on is it was here. If that makes sense. They know it was there, it's in this general area. It's just, there's a couple different descriptions and things that have, inscriptions I should say, on rocks that kind of give you an idea that there might have been more than one. But we definitely know about this one. Alright, so verse 2, or where do we got to? Verse 3, I'm thinking. Where do we got? Back there, Stephanie.
I'm going.
Okay.
Okay. There's so much pressure right now. It's not even loading.
They
I think
began
I
to
got
say
it.
to each other,
Okay, two. Are we on three?
Three.
They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar.
Okay.
Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth."
But the Lord came down to the city and the tower, the building the people were building.
The Lord said, "If as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them."
Come, let us go and confuse the people with different languages. Then they won't be able to understand each other.
In that way, the Lord scattered them all over the world, and they stopped building the city.
Is that it, verse 9?
No,
Oh,
Okay.
that, yeah.
that is why the city was called Babel, because that is where the Lord confused the people with different languages. And in this way, he scattered them all over the world.
Okay. Do y'all remember a few Bible studies back, I told you about a man named Peleg that said in the days of Peleg the earth was divided?
Right.
Remember that?
Yes.
Okay, well that timeline is exactly the same as this timeline. So not only do I believe the earth was divided then, we also know that at that time the nations were divided by languages. Okay? So here's what I want you to get. Before the point of confusion happened, they were all had one mind, they were all united, and their whole focus was, let's build a city and a temple. This tower was their version of a temple. We want to worship together. Now that doesn't sound too wrong. Now what we don't know was exactly what were they worshiping. Whatever it was, God didn't like. Because he said, I got to mess this thing up, otherwise it's getting bad in a hurry. Okay? Now, I wish there was more detail on this in Scripture. So I've had to go to history. Because I want to know. What's going on there? What's happening around that place that God would come down and say, we got to bust this thing up? Okay? So, we're talking about the division of humanity and their travels around the world. They spread the same basic ideology of worship. Okay? Now, I want to explain something to you I've discovered that to me has just amazed me. When they left there, they all left there with the same basic, again, ideology of worship. Right? Even if they couldn't speak the same language, they had all been worshiping the same. So wherever they ended up at, it was going to be similar. Okay? But with the name changes and the language changes, words change. But what I want you to notice here is that what I'm going to show you tonight is this is also, I believe, the birthplace of false worship. Okay? This is where false worship began. And then as it spread around the world, the same general ideas spread with them. But obviously the words changed, the names changed, because languages changed. Okay? But I want to show you tonight some unique things that so much has in common that it can point back to this moment right here. Okay? All right. I got to jump ahead to Revelations. 17 and 5. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Now, I really haven't taught y'all a whole lot about Revelation. Some of y'all have studied it on your own. It's got to be the weirdest book in the Bible. You can't understand Revelations with just the book of Revelations. I mean, you got to know Ezekiel and Daniel and all those other books just for this thing even to make some semblance of sense. Okay? So we have this thing where the Lord is showing John this female, and that on her name is written mystery. Not, I want you to notice it doesn't say Mystery Babylon. It's Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. I want you to notice those are separate things there. Okay? I've heard it referenced as Mystery Babylon. That's not what the word says. The word says that Babylon the Great is the mystery. Now here's what we got to understand. The word Babel and the word Babylon come from the same root word, which does mean confusion. Okay? So that's one of the ways where we know that Babylon and Babel are connected. Because their names, even in the course of history of time, the meaning of it never changed. It was all in this general area right here. Okay? Now, the translation of this verse is the mother of prostitutes and of the vile things of the earth. So she represents the mother that gave birth to so much of the vile things and prostitutes and sexual immorality and all that kind of stuff. So that's what came from her, this woman named Babylon. Okay? Everybody with me on that? Everybody got it? Okay? You get it?
I guess.
All right. It's the birthplace of evil, the birthplace of idol worship and false doctrine. It's where everything started going wrong. Because if you study Scripture, there is not one mention of idol worship or really anything evil happening, not specifically, before the flood. You don't hear of idol worship. It just says that they were sinning. There's no reference to idol worshiping or worshiping of other gods before the flood.
I was laughing at your wife's straw.
Oh, sorry. I was like, we're on to something here.
I was trying to be quiet.
All right, so when I looked at this, I thought, okay, God, did you come down to Babel and bust this thing up because you started seeing them worshiping other gods? Is this the first time that he's witnessing humans worshiping something other than him? Because before that, they didn't worship anything. Before the flood, there's no idol worship. It's just sin. Okay? Now all of a sudden, you have this. Are you Googling it?
I'm just checking.
Okay, sorry.
I just don't know. I've never heard that said before.
Heard what part said.
That there was no idol worship before the flood.
Oh,
There's no mention of it.
okay.
And so now here we get to this place called Babel, and their whole idea is they want to worship and worship together. It makes no sense that God would come down and bust up a party that was for him. Okay?
Good point now.
So, this is where the false doctrine started, and then folklores and myths began to build. Okay? Because it was right after this that everybody spread out. Okay? But there was something that must have been taught there that was spread out. And so the question, that the journey that I was on, was saying, what can I find as a common denominator in almost every world religion? Is there a common denominator that so many of them would have that I could also find archaeological evidence of from Babel? So that was the journey that I've been on for the last 6 years. Okay? All right. Here we go. Somebody read here on the paper Ezekiel 8:14.
He brought me to the north gate of the Lord's temple, and some women were sitting there, weeping for the god Tammuz.
I'm going to call him Tammuz.
Tammuz.
All right, so Ezekiel is getting a vision. I'll give you the short story. God ain't happy. All right, there's a bunch of junk happening, especially happening in the church. God's not happy, and so he shows Ezekiel a vision, and in that vision, he can see, it's like he takes him to that northern gate. He says, look what's happening over here. These women are weeping for the god Tammuz. When I found that scripture, I about went nuts, y'all. And I'm about to explain why. Because I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I had no idea that this would have been found in scripture. Okay? Now, hold that thought. Let's read the next one. Jeremiah 7 and 18.
No wonder I am so angry. Watch how the children gather wood and the fathers build sacrificial fires. See how the women knead dough and make cakes to offer to the Queen of Heaven. And they pour out liquid offerings to their other idol gods.
And you can also read Jeremiah 44, 17 through 19. It's a very similar passage. God is not happy. Look how angry I am. Look what they're doing. They're down there baking cakes for the Queen of Heaven. Okay? All right. So in my research, I discovered, and there are people, I'll admit, there's some people that might not agree 100% with me, but they will agree with the basis of what I'm saying. Nimrod was known for having many battles and many victories. That's how he conquered all this land. One of these places he's conquered, and I'm saying one of them because, again, historians debate where it was, but they all agree it did happen. Okay? One of those places, he conquered a king and took the king's wife home with him. Okay? Made her his queen. She had a very common name that has been used literally dozens of times, even going as far as being used in Dante's Inferno. Like, this name just kind of keeps coming up in history, and the name is Semiramis. Okay? You can if you started to Google on her, you would find so much stuff. So again, that's where I came back to. Okay, I need truth here. I don't want to be out here with folklore. I want truth. Where can I find archaeological evidence? Okay? So, in the excavations around Nimrod, right here, which, by the way, Nimrod means Nimrod. So this city was built after him. Nineveh means Ninuveh, which is another language's version of Nimrod. Like, it's all named after him. Okay? Because he was a mighty king. Right? So, in one of these places, they uncovered some tablets that were ancient. And on it, the name of the king that started with an A that was 17 letters long that I can't pronounce, okay? His wife's name was inscribed Semiramis.
How you spell that?
It's on your paper.
It's on your paper.
Yeah. I'm giving you the... Now, don't read ahead too much. She's doing good, y'all. Some of y'all read ahead. Shouldn't have known that. All right? All right, so Semiramis. There are multiple both inscriptions and legends that all agree on another thing. That Nimrod and Semiramis, she became pregnant. Okay? Now, the name of her son, there's multiple names for this guy. Okay? But the one that is the most common name out there is the name Tammuz. Okay? So, there was a little problem that happened while she was pregnant. Apparently, that's when Nimrod died. And she elevated herself to queen of the land. She took over the throne. A few months later, she gives birth to Tammuz, and she makes a public declaration. They have inscriptions they found in stone of this, where she announces that her son Tammuz is also his father Nimrod. That Nimrod had come back through his son.
Okay. Reincarnated through his son, okay.
Okay, that's pretty common. A lot of folks believe that. Okay? All right. We have this woman that's queen. Okay? Tradition teaches us that Tammuz became the god of agriculture, and that he died but was resurrected 40 days later. Okay, now this is all in your paper, you don't have to write this down. Okay? And again, this is found in inscriptions. His 40 days of death became a festival that was called the Weeping Festival. Now, I'm telling you what I found in historical documents. Okay? The Weeping Festival. Now, before I go any further, what was that God told Ezekiel? What are those women doing over there weeping for the god Tammuz? Why are they holding this festival? Because what that was idol worship. So here we have a link from Scripture of a very popular form of religious worship, and it always coincided with the planting season, because they believed that his death and then his resurrection represented the planting of a seed and the harvest time. He became the god of, remember, this is how folklore starts. This is how, okay, all those stuff transfers, all right? Well, then she announces, again, through a inscription, she became known as Mother Goddess, because she was mother of the god, Tammuz, and she referred to herself as the Queen of Heaven. So when God's over here getting mad about Jeremiah, saying, you know how angry I am? Why are they doing this? So here's something cool. In Asher right here, in one of their archaeological digs, they were uncovering a temple, and in one section of the temple, there was an inscription on the wall of a goddess. Okay? The goddess had a moon on her head. Okay? Around her, they found ovens. And they found these things where that was basically like a cake thing. And what they discovered is in Asher right here, they baked cakes to this moon goddess. Okay? So, I got to take you back to Nimrod and Semiramis. When she was declaring that her husband had become this god, she declared that he renewed himself every day with the rising of the sun, and then that she oversaw the kingdom at night as the moon goddess. Okay? All right, if you look the picture up here, I don't know if you can really see what we got going here. This is the A with 17 letters I can't pronounce. This is Nimrod. This was taken from one of the temples in that Shinar area. Okay? They elevated him to a god, the sun god. All right? From there, as he went west, okay, and the people migrated west, as the language changed there, when you get onto the other side of where the Saudi Arabian desert is, okay, which starts what we're going to know in biblical terms as Moab, his name changed to Baal, the sun god. Anybody got some clicking going on right now? Like
Spell Baal.
B-A-A-L.
Okay, yeah.
Sound familiar?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's another one right here. I had to take a picture of that one too. They would put these things everywhere as protective spirits because they believed his spirit was protecting them. Okay? His spirit protected them during the day, her spirit protected them at night, and their son's spirit, if you will, made their fields grow. how I feel sometimes. She's down there with it. All right, so let's just stop right here. Anybody got any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Oh, yeah. I think it was 2 sessions ago, what was it the god that had like the half moon?
Namu.
Namu, okay.
Namu,
Where
Namor.
is he in the?
Yeah, you want to talk about that? What does his name start with? What's that first letter?
N.
Right?
Uh-huh, and he was only just a few miles downstream, right? Right here?
Right?
Guess what? It's all the same God. It's just as they traveled, names changed. It's all the same God. It's all the sun God, the moon God, and I'm fixing to get to another one.
Oh.
All right? But here's what we always saw. Wherever the sun was, like the S-U-N, sky God, sun God, okay, it was always masculine. But the interesting thing happened was the female is always referred to in connection to the moon. Okay? Do y'all remember the Old Testament god Molech? Remember Molech? Molech was a bull god, in the shape of a bull. And his idol was a big furnace, if you will. And the bull had his hands like this. And the way they worshiped that bull was they would place babies in his hands, and the babies would fall off into his fiery belly. And you could read in Scripture where I think it was Josiah, one of those kings, that they made him play drums loud enough outside to drown out the screaming of the children, okay? Well, the fire in his belly, they believed, was the fire from the sun, and that anytime you see Molech, that's just some, should I say, folklore up version of same God, okay? It just changes through time, okay? Good question, though. That got me down that road. Next question before I go any further.
Is this tied into mythology?
We're going to get there just a little bit. Okay? Anybody else? Keep going? All right. Let's see here. I'm going to give you some other names that through the course of history, this Semiramis, this moon goddess, this queen of heaven, what other names, and you can write these down or maybe you'll just remember them, who knows.
Oh, sure.
So I have to go to the Bible on this one. Ashtoreth. You ever look in the Old Testament, talk about the Asherah poles, the groves, okay, Ashtoreth. I've also talked about Ishtar, I-S-H-T-A-R. So she not only was a moon goddess, she became the star of the night, which became the morning star, which I told y'all the morning star is what became Venus, and Lucifer literally means morning star. Right? Okay, some other names for her. Astarte, A-S-T-A-R-T-E. Y'all want to see that one?
They're all on there.
They're all on there. There's a bunch of those. So let's look at some pictures now. How about this? So this is something that was uncovered in that northern Mesopotamia area, around the area where they all argue somewhere in here was the Tower of Babel. It had inscriptions on it, and the inscriptions read Semiramis and Tammuz. You have this mother with a baby in her hands. Now I want you to notice there's a cap on this thing, on that baby. Somebody read Genesis 3:15. Whoever's got it, just go for it.
And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel.
Anybody remember that? That is the first prophecy of the Messiah. He's telling, the whole passage here is God is telling Eve, you're going to have a descendant whose heel is going to crush the head of that serpent. Now we understand through the Bible that that was Jesus defeating Satan. Okay? So, everybody who was on the ark believed that prophecy. We all agree with it. Noah, his children, they all believed that prophecy. So when they came off the ark, those 3 sons all believed that prophecy. So when you got Ham, and then his grandson, Noah's great-grandson is Nimrod, who would have believed that prophecy. And then Nimrod apparently taught it to his wife because there was an inscription found where she decided that her son was that son. And that their Tammuz was the one that would defeat evil. Okay?
So do you think in your mind was Nimrod bad, or was it Semiramis?
I think she was the. I think it really got crazy with her,
And
and it was after he died. That's when a lot of this.
Kind of,
Yeah,
okay.
because he never declared himself king or God. She's the one that claimed he was the son of God. Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's just watch the screen up here a little bit. Just check this out. Remember I said they all spread out with the same basic ideologies? You get to Egypt, you find Isis and Horus. So here I am in the British Museum next to this idol. There's another picture of it. The moon, right? Horus was considered the holy child. Let's just keep going. What about Sumer? Sumer is lower Babylon area. Namu and Enki. Did a little research on Namu. It was the female version of Nanar, as if he became a woman and had a son who was him. Y'all, it's the same story, it's just different names.
Yeah.
Right? Let's keep going. What about Hinduism? Devaki and Krishna. There's another picture of it. Look at the halo. Let's go to China. Xingmu and a child whose name I can't even come close to pronouncing. Right there. Let's go back to India. There's another one. Isi and Iswara. This picture is really messy, but it's another haloed child. Phoenicia, Ashtoreth and Baal. Known as Ashtoreth has the moon. Here's their son, right here. His name is debatable. I can't really find it in scripture, but in historical stuff, his name was Druis, D-R-U-I-S. But they believe that he had one. In Greece, Irene and Plutus. I could keep going. I'm going to stop right there. There are 14 major world religions, if you will, that all have in common Queen of Heaven, Holy Child.
So when God knocked down Babel, they all split and did their own
Yes.
deals, and they're counterfeiting what is real, which is Mary and Jesus.
Yes. All because Semiramis decided she had the one.
And that's why God said, no way, we're done. Wow.
Kim, what do you think?
I just think that I didn't realize this. That's really cool.
Somebody else.
Say that one more time, 14 major religions.
There's 14, I have 14 that I found, who all have a Queen of Heaven / Holy Child concept in it.
You went back to Genesis for
3:15.
and that was the first,
That was the prophecy that
so they
Semiramis,
all heard that. That's what you're.
when they
yeah.
started there. Now you got to imagine as they start spreading out.
Oh, I know.
They
And-
all knew there was gonna be a mother and a child.
Yes.
That's what you're saying, okay.
Yes.
Don't you find it interesting, though, that God put something in us that had a need to search for the one true God, and everybody,
Oh yeah.
did all
Yeah.
this, looking for the one
Mhm.
true God. And that's what, to me, that's where all of this chaos came from, is,
Great
there's
point.
something in us that, wants to know the true God in
Mhm.
everybody. So,
I believe that.
yeah, I do too.
Yep. There's Patty. Somebody else, comments, questions on this part?
So I guess God figured they would do less harm by splitting them all up.
And you gotta remember,
Than keeping them together.
Nimrod's kingdom was really established then. I mean, the Tower of Babel is where that whole kingdom come together. So all these other cities were already built. This was just a time where they all got together and it's like, we got some issues right here. Okay? But what I found so interesting was this common link. And it all goes back to this, hear me now, this woman that gave birth to evil worship. So this mystery of Babylon, the Great, all starts at Babel. And I'm not bashing women, but I'm saying, Semiramis, you messed up. Okay? Now, let's dig just a little more. The history of the woman in the moon. So there's a whole bunch of them down there I've listed for you there. And this is where I have to warn us to make sure that we're not allowing traditions and folklore and all that stuff to infiltrate back into the Christian church. Okay? Who's that?
You're supposed to be married.
So this is from Revelations chapter 12. Revelations chapter 12 clearly defines a woman with 12 stars as a crown on a moon. Okay? Giving birth to a child.
That's the opposite of that idol that you were standing.
Huh.
Did you see that?
Oh, yeah.
Only now Mary's standing on top of
Oh,
it.
yeah. With the serpent right here.
Yeah.
By the way. So here's the interesting thing. It was in the 400s that one of the popes declared that the woman of Revelations 12 was Mary, and they gave her the title of Queen of Heaven.
How long ago?
400s.
Okay,
Like 400.
I missed that, sorry.
It was in the 5th century. So why would this be so dangerous? Well, number one, if you read chapter 12, verse 17, it clearly shows that that woman was not just the woman who had seed of Jesus, but it was the woman who had seed that conquered the world. More of it, it has to be the church. And so when you ask, what's the biggest difference between the Catholic Church and Protestant? One of the defining factors is Mary the Queen of Heaven, or is the church the Queen of Heaven? The answer is the church is the Queen of Heaven because we're the bride of Christ. Okay? And the danger of it is, if you keep going further, this is the Guadalupe, the one from Guatemala. You've got the child down here holding up everything. Okay? But it just has too many similarities. Because the problem is just like for Semiramis, she wanted the glory, she wanted the worship, and we end up with folks who, even in the innocence of their faith, start putting more faith and prayers into her than him.
I always wondered where that came from. I'm not Catholic, but I you know, the rosary and all the different Hail Marys and things.
So I've interviewed some really strong Catholic faith folks, okay? And as I've talked about this stuff, two of them specifically said, I've never heard any of this before. I had no idea this started in 400. I had no idea that Pope Pius is the one who gave her that title, Queen of Heaven. We just thought that was what it was, okay? Well, let's go back to Pope Pius. Who was he? Where where did he come from? Well, he came out of an old Germanic tribe that was the one that wrote, get my notes going here, Gesta Teveronorium, I can't pronounce it right here. This right here,
Mm-hmm.
that Germanic tribe was who wrote that, who was the one that described, who started overlapping this idea of Queen of Heaven worship, and it clearly took the mythology and brought it into the church. And that's where I say we've got to be careful that we're not allowing that Babel stuff to come in, because there's only one we're supposed to be praying to, one we're supposed to worship. There's one name that every knee is going to bow to. That's Jesus. The first kingdom built by Nimrod was also where false doctrine began on earth. This was also the place Babylon was founded, which became a very central point of the false doctrine in Scripture. That's why at the very end, the Lord speaks to John and says, that Babylon is going to fall. That woman, that harlot is going to fall, because I've got another woman I'm trying to bring up. That's the bride. That's us. And that's my story.